So let's talk about something you hear a lot these days. Is there a crisis in modern masculinity? The sources we're digging into today, well, they don't just say yes. They diagnose it as a deep spiritual problem, and they propose a pretty radical solution they call biblical manhood. So let's break down exactly what they mean by that. Now, the sources we're looking at, they kick this whole thing off with a really sobering statistic. Men are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than women. And for them, this isn't just a number on a page. It's a massive red flag, a symptom of something much, much deeper, what they call a spiritual sickness. So that really begs the question, right? According to this viewpoint, what's truly behind this crisis? And maybe more importantly, what's the way out? That's very the core of what we're going to explore here. We're going to follow their line of thinking, from how they diagnose the problem all the way to their specific call to action. Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. It's basically a 6-part journey. First, we'll look at the crisis itself. Then we'll get into the spiritual diagnosis, the why behind it all. After that, we'll hear the call to fight. From there, it gets really interesting. We'll explore how they completely redefine strength and how worship fits in as this engine for change. And finally, we'll pull it all together to see what this different measure of a man actually looks like. All right, let's jump right into part 1. So how do these sources actually define the problem? Well, it all starts by taking a hard, honest look at where men are at today. And this quote really gets to the heart of it. The argument they're making isn't that culture doesn't matter, but that the real root of the problem, it's spiritual. And that one idea, right there, it completely shifts the conversation. We're not talking about sociology anymore. We're talking about a spiritual battle. Okay, so that leads us right into our second section. Because if you diagnose the problem as spiritual, that changes everything. The whole way you look at it has to shift, you know? It's not about sociology anymore. It's about theology. And the language changes. It goes from being a struggle to being a war. And that's the key distinction they make. This isn't just a personal struggle. They argue it's an actual war. See, a struggle feels internal, right? It's personal. It's a man wrestling with his own issues. But a war, that implies there's an enemy, an external, intelligent adversary. And that reframes the entire conflict. And they're really specific about who this adversary is. The word they use is Satan, but they're quick to point out this isn't some cartoon character with a pitchfork. They go back to the original meaning of the word, adversary or accuser, an opponent whose entire goal is just to tear you down. And this verse from Ephesians, this is presented as the bedrock for this whole way of thinking. The fight, it says, isn't against flesh and blood. It's not against other people. It's against these cosmic powers. And once you believe that, it shapes every single thing that comes next. So, okay, how does this enemy actually work? Well, the sources use this military idea of a foothold. The thinking is the adversary doesn't have to take over your whole life in one go. Nope. All he needs is one little unguarded spot, one compromise you make, and he can set up a beachhead. And from there, he can launch a much bigger attack. And they use this really vivid analogy to explain how that foothold happens. It's called the cheese trap. Think about it like this. You've got these dogs, and they absolutely love cheese, but they hate being in their crate. So what do? You put the cheese, the bait, the thing they want, inside the crate. They dive right in for it, and then, snap, the trap is sprung. Their own desire is what led them right into ruin. It's the very thing that got them captured. So if you accept the premise that it's a war, the next logical question is, what do you do about it? And that brings us to section 3, which lays out a really clear call to action. You have to stop being a civilian and become a soldier. This verse from 1 Corinthians is pretty much presented as the central command, the marching orders. It's like a 4-part instruction manual for this spiritual battle. Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like a man, be strong. And the sources draw this really sharp line in the sand between 2 different mindsets. You've got the civilian, who's all about comfort, avoiding anything difficult, just trying to fit in. Then you have the soldier, who endures suffering, who expects a fight, and who's living for a higher calling. The message is pretty blunt. Get off the couch and enlist. But what does it even mean to be strong in this context? That's where we get to section 4, and this is a huge turning point in the whole argument. This is where they completely redefine what strength is, throwing out the world's standards and bringing in a whole new model of manhood. And this table really lays out the core difference. The argument goes that the world measures a man by these 3 external things: position, your status and rank; possession, how much stuff you have, and power, your influence over others. The biblical model they propose, it just throws all that out, and it replaces it with 4 internal qualities: Sabbath, perseverance, humility, and service. Okay, so let's break those 4 pillars down a little bit. First, the Sabbath man. This isn't just about taking a day off. It's about having a life that's rightly ordered with God at the center of everything, which is where they say true rest comes from. Then the persevering man. His strength is shown by his ability to endure pain for the benefit of other people. Next, the humble man. This is a guy who knows how to submit to authority. And finally, the serving man. He finds his greatness not by climbing up, but by taking the lowest place to help others, modeling Jesus who came not to be served, but to serve. And this quote, this just paints the most powerful picture of this new idea of strength. You have Jesus, who is described as having all authority in the universe, and what does he do? He doesn't flex his power. He dresses himself like a servant, takes the lowest possible role, and washes his disciples' feet. I mean, that's the whole point in a nutshell, right? True strength is service. Okay, but how does a person actually change like that? How does this transformation happen? Well, the sources are really, really clear on this. This is not a self-help program. It's not about trying harder. Instead, it's all rooted in one specific act: worship. And when they say worship, they don't just mean singing songs on a Sunday. Their definition is way bigger. It's the act of presenting your body, the totality of who you are, everything, as a living sacrifice to God. Your time, your goals, your relationships, the whole shebang. So you have these 2 forces constantly at work. On one side, you have the world, which is always trying to press you into its mold, to get you to think its way about what matters. But on the other side, you have transformation. And that comes from what the Bible calls the renewal of your mind. Basically, having your entire way of thinking reshaped by a different standard. And this right here, this is the key to how it all works. The message is super clear. You can't change yourself. You just don't have the power. Instead, they teach that it's the Spirit of God, using the Word of God, that actually does the changing. It's a divine process from start to finish, not something you can just will yourself to do. All right, so that brings us to our last section where we're going to pull all these threads together. We've seen the diagnosis, we've walked through the path they lay out. So what's the big takeaway? What is this different measure of man all about? And we're going to end on this one final question. It's designed to take all of this from being just an idea and make it incredibly personal. Just think about this for a second. If the most influential man in your life, your father, your brother, your husband, your mentor, if he truly embodied these principles, Sabbath, perseverance, humility, and service, how would your world be different? Yeah, that's a powerful thought to sit with.